my loves, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hi, welcome. My name is Wendy. Welcome to Makeup and Crime. Take a seat, put on your headphones, grab a cup of wine, beer, soda, whatever, and join us as we embark on this new episode of Makeup and Crime. If you are not new here, hi, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. Today we are going to be talking about Dennis Rader. If you have Netflix, you have probably seen this story in a documentary called Catching Killers. Let me just tell you, I cannot believe how long Dennis Rader got away with what he did, because there are, in certain cases, he left witnesses who they might have been, you know, underage. They could have potentially identified him, and it just blows my mind seeing how long he got away with this. And it's just a crazy story, a crazy crime, a crazy person that committed this, and it's hard to believe everything that he did. So we are going to be talking about Dennis Rader. He was born March 9th, 1945 to William and Dorothea Rader in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Even though he was born in Pittsburgh, Kansas, he was raised in Wichita, Kansas, and I hope that I'm saying that right. He was the oldest of 4 boys, and what I could find out about his childhood is that it was a normal childhood. It wasn't like he had this dramatic experience happen to him. He went to school like a normal kid. He was an average pupil. He loved being outdoors. He loved to hike. He loved to hunt and fish with his brothers and his dad. His dad was a former Marine. And when I found it, what I searched about his school, it just said that he was an average pupil, that his favorite thing about school was actually just going to recess, and I guess during the snow, get into snowball fights with his friends, which I guess it's pretty normal, you know. Like, I loved getting into snowball fights with my family when I was young, and it would get pretty nasty between us. Just saying. What he claimed happened when he was little was that he was dropped in, like, on his head when he was little. And if you know, if you have seen other videos, you know that many people who turn out to be serial killers, I'm not saying all, but the few that I know have had some type of head trauma or brain trauma. So it is said that in his youth he developed this fantasy of bondage, and he would kill animals and fantasize about bondage. He dropped out of college and joined the Air Force in the mid-1960s. So that's all I could find out about his childhood. Like I said, seems pretty normal besides the fact that he loved to kill animals and fantasize about bondage. But you do you. After he went to the Air Force in the 1960s, in the mid-1970s is when he returned to Wichita, Kansas, and where he married his wife and had 2 kids. He held various jobs throughout his adulthood. He had a job at a Coleman company. There he made like camping equipment. So that was basically what he did there. He did work for like ADT and was also an officer. So after he graduated from Wichita State University in 1979, he actually started working for none other than ADT company. If you live in the United States, or I'm guessing other countries have it as well, but ADT is like a security company here where they can install cameras and like alarm systems for your house. Just, you know, security company. In 1991, he became a compliance officer in Park City, Kansas. Rader was very active in his church, and he served as a Boy Scout leader because of his son, who was a Boy Scout. That brings us to January 5th, 1974, where Dennis Rader unfortunately commits his first crime against the Otero family. Around 2 p.m. on January 5th, 1974, Dennis Rader enters the house of Joseph and Julie Otero. Joseph Otero was 38 at the time and Julie Otero was 33. He entered the house by cutting the phone line, so he went to the backyard of the Otero's family. He then cut the phone lines to make sure that they wouldn't call for help, and he enters through the back door of the house. There he strangles both Joseph Otero and Julie Otero, and strangles Junior Otero, who was 9, and Josephine Otero, who was 11 at the time. He put a bag over Mr. Otero's face, and Mr. Otero was quick, I want to say quick to react, because he quickly like punched a hole with his finger, I'm guessing, in like the area where his mouth was, so he could breathe. But he lost conscious, so you know, Rader thought, okay, he's done, he's dead. So he moves on to Julie, does the same thing, strangles her, but she loses consciousness. I think that's how you say the word, consciousness, and she passes out. While Julie is passed out, Mr. Otero regains consciousness, and Dennis Rader goes again, puts a bag over Mr. Otero's face along with the t-shirt, so he's not able to punch a hole in the bag anymore. And this is how Mr. Otero eventually loses his life. While Rader was killing Mr. Otero, Julie regains consciousness. When Julie regains her conscious, I think that's how you say it. Once again, bear with me if I'm not pronouncing this word right. But once she regains her, you know, where she's at, what's happening, she's very upset, and Rader comes over to her, and you know, he's ready to go at her again. And what she says before she dies is actually, "Spare my son, Junior." And Rader, I was reading the confessions that Rader made, like remembering what he did to the Otero family, and he says that he actually was gonna spare Junior's life. So he went ahead and like removed the rope and the cord that were around Junior's neck. But I don't know what happened between Julie and Rader after he started strangling her again with a rope and a cord around her neck. He says that he was just mad about the situation. I'm not sure if she said anything else. He does not mention that she said anything else to him. And he goes ahead, puts a rope and a cord around Junior's neck once more, puts a bag over his head along with a t-shirt, the same thing that he did to Mr. Otero, and strangles him to death. So I'm not sure what happened, why he changed his mind, but eventually Junior Otero, who's only 9 at the time, ends up losing his life. Then, remember how I said it was 4 people, Mr. Joseph Otero, Julie Otero, Junior Otero, and Josephine Otero, where Josephine Otero, who's only 11, is still alive. So he takes Josephine Otero down to the basement. I can't imagine what was going through her head at that time, because I mean, your parents are dead, your brother is dead, and you have nobody to come and rescue you. I don't know what could be going through a young child's head when something like this is happening. I just can't. But Rader takes her down to the basement. There's like, you can search this on Google. I am not going to be posting pictures because I just don't want you to look at it. But if you are curious, you can search pictures of the crime scene. But Rader ties Josephine's hands behind like this pipe, that's in the basement, and ties her feet to the pipe as well. And in the pictures you can see that she's not wearing any type of clothes waist down. The articles say that there was no evidence of any type of abuse, which is good, because I couldn't imagine her going through that, and I just can't. But I'm just glad there wasn't any type of abuse done on her. He actually ends up hanging Josephine from that pipe, like hanging her. And it is said in the articles that they did find bodily fluids next to Josephine, but once again they found no evidence of any type of assault done on Josephine or any other member of the family. He then goes through the household of Mr. Joseph and Julie Otero's and takes a radio and a watch from the household. I did find in another article saying that they did have, I believe, 2 or 3 more kids, which they came home later that day to find their family murdered in their own house. I don't know how, I can't start to imagine how traumatic that could be for the rest of the family. Like coming into your house thinking you're gonna walk in on your mom and your dad watching TV along with your brother and sister, and just find that they have been murdered in what's supposed to be your safe place. When I think about my home, I think about my safe place where nobody can break in, where I can be me, where I know that I'm protected from the outside world, because this is where I feel comfortable. So knowing that somebody broke in and killed your family, I could not be safe anymore in any household ever again. Like I would just be panicking. If nothing has happened to me inside my houses, but I have cameras installed just to make sure that nothing is going on. You know, you just have to take precautions because people are crazy out here. One thing I forgot to mention, remember how I said Rader worked for the Coleman Company making camping equipment? Guess who worked at the Coleman Company? Julie Otero. Julie Otero worked at the Coleman Company. So when I read that, my guess was like she somehow knew Rader, because Rader had to get to know his victims close, because he does say that in order for him to finally make his move, he would stalk them, he would follow them to their job, he would follow them to their house. So since they both worked at the Coleman Company, I'm guessing Rader actually had like this work relationship with her where they had to talk, and I'm guessing he asked about family and all of that stuff, that he knew how many people were going to be at the house during that day, you know, because you're not just gonna pick a random person and say, hey, you know what, I feel like I need to relieve some stress and I'm just gonna go kill somebody. No. On April 4th, 1974, Rader breaks into the house of Catherine Bright. He goes around the house making sure that there's nobody there, goes into her bedroom and is waiting for Catherine to come home and is expecting her to be alone. She comes inside the house, but she was not alone. Nay. She was with her brother Kevin, who was 19 at the time. When Rader sees that Catherine is not alone, that she's actually with her brother Kevin, he rushes out of the bedroom with a gun pointing straight at them. Rader made up this thing that he was a wanted criminal and he was on his way to New York, that he just needed food, he just needed some warm clothes and transport and just a place to like get all these things. So what he did is he forced them in to Catherine's bedroom. There in the bedroom, he tells Kevin to tie Catherine's hands and feet. Once Kevin does this, Rader takes Kevin to another bedroom where he tries to tie Kevin, but he wasn't successful. Kevin started putting up a fight. They're getting into an altercation, and Kevin he was this close to taking off the gun from Rader, but Rader somehow gains control back of the gun and shoots Kevin not once but 2 times on his head. Once Rader shoots Kevin 2 times in the head, he's thinking, okay, like, he's dead. I need to go and finish what I started with Catherine. So he heads over to Catherine. Remember, Catherine is tied up in her bedroom, and she started actually putting up a fight. And while Rader is in the other room with Catherine, Kevin, remember, Rader thinks that he's dead. He's not actually dead. He somehow manages to get up and run out of the house, get into his car, and goes look for help. Remember that Rader always cut the phone lines before he went into the house. Why? In case something like this happened. He wanted to make sure that his victims weren't able to call the police. And that's why Kevin had to run out of the house, get into his car, and find help somewhere. He's in the bedroom with Catherine. Catherine is putting up a fight. He is trying to strangle Catherine, and when he's realizing while he's strangling Catherine, like, I'm not going to be able to do this because she is putting up a fight. So he takes a knife and starts stabbing her in the abdomen. While Rader was stabbing Catherine in the abdomen, he heard Kevin run out of the house. So, you know, he knows that help is gonna be on their way sooner rather than later. He goes around the house cleaning up, making sure that there's nothing that can be tied back to him. Kevin manages to get help to Catherine. Catherine was taken to the hospital. She had multiple emergency surgeries. Even after having all the emergency surgeries and blood transfusions, she eventually lost her life. Kevin was successful. He did manage to make it through his critical condition and lived. On October of 1974, a teenager goes to the police office, the police building. I'm forgetting what it's called. You remember Rader's first murder? Well, he confesses saying that he killed the Oteros along with 2 other of his friends. So not only is he confessing to killing the Oteros by himself, but he's implicating 2 of his friends in the killings as well. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to, like, get attention? These are things that you cannot be playing around with. Like, we need to find the killer, the real killer. Rader, of course, is not gonna let anybody take account. He's not gonna let anybody take responsibility about what he did. So he writes a letter, and in his letter, and I'm gonna look at my notes so I don't mess up, okay? In his letters, he says, those 3 dudes you have in custody are just talking to get publicity. They know nothing at all. So after he wrote that, he actually wrote a lot more details about the Otero's killings that the police officers determined, like, hey, there's so much information in this letter, like the killer had to actually stand over the family or the victims to know exactly what had happened. And the only person that can know this information is the killer. So they eventually let the teenagers go, and Rader is still out and about doing what he's doing in his daily life. After the letter surfaced is when Rader started working for the ADT company. There he was called the Blue Book Man because he followed rules and regulations down to a T. He didn't derive from them. He was always following rules. March 17th, 1977, he knocks on the door of the person that he has picked out. No one answers, so I'm guessing he's not gonna wait. So he starts going around the neighborhood and spots a kid walking to his house and stops this kid, and this kid's name was Steve Relford. He was 5 years old at the time. So he said he stopped Steve, showed him a picture of Rader's own family, and said that he was looking for them and if he had seen them. Steve said no, and Rader was like, okay, thank you so much for your help, and Steve said you're welcome, and Steve headed on to his house. Well, Rader he was pretending not to see where Steve was heading, but of course Rader knows where Steve is heading because he is watching every step that Steve is taking until Steve reaches his house. Rader sees which house Steve goes into, so he goes around trying not to draw any suspicion to him and knocks on the door of Steve Relford. And of course, you know, he had talked to Steve in the streets. So he passes himself as a detective, and Steve lets him in the house of Shirley Bean. Besides Steve, there were two other children in the household. Shirley, Steve's mom, is nowhere to be seen. I'm guessing she was in the bedroom or using the bathroom or something. But Rader takes advantage of this because the kids were watching TV and the blinds were open, they were drawn up. So Rader comes and turns off the TV and turns down the blinds just to make sure that nobody is watching what he's about to do. So Shirley comes out from wherever she is into the living room, and she's startled when she sees Rader there, the TV turned off, the blinds drawn down, and he takes out his gun, tells the kids to go into the bathroom at gunpoint, and he tells Shirley, cooperate. If you cooperate, nothing is going to happen to your kids. I've done this before. I suffer from sexual fantasies, and I'm going to do this to you, and I'm going to let you live. So in Shirley's mind, she's like, okay, I have to protect my kids. I need to live. And so, like I said, he locks them in the bathroom, takes Shirley to her bedroom, makes Shirley move the bed to the door that was leading to the bathroom so the kids couldn't get out, and he then proceeds to tie Shirley up and undress her while the kids are screaming in the bathroom to be let out. He then proceeds to tie a rope around Shirley's neck and proceeds to strangle her until she is no longer alive. While he is doing this, Rader hears the phone ring. He gets nervous, so he starts cleaning up, making sure there's like I said, nothing to tie him back to the murder. He didn't even let the children out of the bathroom. He just left the children in the bathroom screaming, probably really scared because they didn't know what was going on. Then December 8th, 1977, Rader had been stalking a 25-year-old named Nancy Fox. Rader said that the more he stalked the person that he was eventually killed, the more comfortable he got. So that's what he did with Nancy. He stalked her. He went to her job. He opened the mailbox, found out her name, found out where she worked, and he actually went a couple of times to her work I don't even know why. Imagine this poor lady, this poor girl, talking to her potential killer, and she doesn't even know it. She doesn't know that this man is gonna take her life. But he did this a couple times, making, you know, like, I'm guessing in his mind, taunting them, even though they didn't know that they were next. You know, nobody expects to be next in somebody else's list or somebody else's fantasies. And after he's comfortable enough, he goes to Nancy's house. He cuts the phone lines, breaks into her duplex through the back, and he's just there patiently waiting for her to get home. He's been stalking her for a while. He knows that she lives alone. He has nobody else to worry about. So when she goes into her house, of course she's scared to see that there's this man that she's seen before with a gun pointing towards her, and I'm guessing, you know, she couldn't make a run for it. And Rader tells the same thing he told Shirley, remember Shirley Vian, that he has sexual fantasies and that he was going to assault her, and that she just needed to cooperate, and he was gonna let her live. I don't understand why he has to make this comment, and I don't believe him one bit when he says this. He says that Nancy was upset, so they sat down and talked while she had like a cigarette or something. Not a cigarette, a cigar. So they were just sitting talking, having a cigar. I don't believe that one bit, but that's what he states happened, so we're gonna try to believe what he says, that they talked and calmed her down. I don't know how you're gonna calm somebody down after telling them that you're gonna assault them. After she's done talking, after he makes her feel uncomfortable, even though I don't believe it one bit. So she went to the bathroom, undressed herself, and get this is the first time that I see that Rader does this, but Rader says that he was actually undressed to a certain degree, so he wasn't fully undressed. He takes Nancy, lays her gently on the bed, ties her up, gets on top of Nancy, wraps a belt around Nancy's neck, and strangles her until she no longer has life. After this, Rader proceeds to take off the belt and tie a pantyhose around her neck. After he tied the pantyhose on her neck and hands, when I say hands I mean wrists, he then proceeded to touch himself. After he was done relieving himself, touching himself, he takes his time, gets dressed, cleans everything up like he always does, goes around the house, takes souvenirs, and leaves. And he does say that the next day on his way to work, he calls 911 and says the following: "Yes, you will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing. Nancy Fox. That is correct." As you can expect, police officers are not taking this as a joke, so they rush over to Nancy's house just to find Nancy, like the caller said, dead. After his 7th victim, the police finally say, okay, we have a serial killer in our midst. Like, it's official, this is a serial killer. And they didn't actually let the public know because they said that they didn't want to set off panic. Rader, being the narcissist he is, he actually wrote a poem to the newspaper called Shirley Locks, and the newspaper thought that this was a Valentine's Day poem because it said the following: "Shirley Locks, wilt thou be mine?" Of course, they didn't make the connection between Shirley Vian and Shirley Locks, who was in the poem. So like I said, they thought it was like a Valentine's Day poem, and they ran it through the newspaper. What really set off panic though was when he reached out to KAKE TV, and he said the following: How many people do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper or some national attention? Then on April 28th, 1979, Anna Williams, who was 63 at the time, was his 8th potential victim. So he was just sitting there waiting for Anna, and thankfully Anna took too long to get home, and Rader just like eventually like thought like, hey, this is taking too long, so he grabbed his stuff and left. Less than 2 months later, after that happens, he actually sent a letter, well, a poem, and like a mail package to her house. Inside was personal items of Anna and a poem that said, "Oh Anna, why didn't you appear?" And this is when she like, oh snap, like if I would have come home earlier, I could have been his potential victim. And I'm guessing she was alleviated that she didn't got home in time, because she would have been in this death list that he had. So remember how he killed Nancy and the next day he called the police officers to let them know? Well, you know, this is all recorded. The police on August 14th, 1979 released this this recorded call out to the public, hoping that somebody could identify the voice, but nothing came, like no tips came into the police station. In April 27th, 1985, he reappears after 8 years being dormant, of no news, no killings. His next victim will be Maureen Hedge, who is 53 at the time. And guess what? Maureen Hedge was actually a neighbor of Rader, of Dennis Rader. Rader gets home, sees Maureen's car in the driveway, carefully sneaks into the house like a ninja. After searching the house, he knows that Maureen is actually not in. Maureen comes in the house, like he hears the doorknob rattling, so he quickly goes hide. And Maureen didn't come alone. She actually had a male visitor with her. A male visitor? So remember, Rader is hiding and the male visitor was there for who knows how long. And Maureen was sleeping. He finally came out of his hiding hole, and when he turned on the bathroom lights, Maureen just woke up, and I'm guessing when she saw Rader, she screamed because she was startled to have somebody in her house. And then Rader quickly jumps on top of Maureen and starts strangling her. After Rader strangles Maureen, he strips her down to nothing. He goes through her purse, personal belongings, and after he's done that, he puts her on top of a blanket, wraps her up, and puts her in the back of his trunk, of his car trunk. Remember how I said Rader was very active in his church? Well, guess where he took Maureen's body? To his church. He took Maureen's body to Christ Lutheran Church, where he posed her and posed the body to take pictures of her in bondage. And he took several pictures. After he was done taking pictures of the body, he puts her back in the trunk and disposes of Maureen's body in a ditch. Now, the police did not make a connection to the BTK killer, to Rader, because this was not his method of killing at all. He never took bodies out of the house. He will always leave the bodies inside the house, clean up, take souvenirs and whatnot. By September 16, 1986, he had his 9th victim picked out. Vicky Wegeler, I think I'm saying that right, Wegeler, who was 28 at the time. So during his regular, 9-to-5 job, during his lunch break, he goes out of his job, dresses up as a telephone repairman, goes to Vicky's neighborhood, knocks on a few doors. So when he finally reaches Vicky's house, it wouldn't seem weird that he was just knocking on hers. So he knocks on her house. He says, hey, I'm just checking the telephone lines to make sure that they're working, blah blah blah. And Vicky lets him inside the house. Let me put on my lashes off camera because it's going to be so difficult to do. When she lets him in, takes him to where her phone is, and as soon as she turns around, Rader pulls out a gun and points it at her. After he pulls out the gun, he proceeds to take her to her bedroom, tries to tie her up, but she gets loose, so they start putting up a fight. And Vicky was not going down like that. Like, she put up a fight. When I say she put up a fight, is she hit him, she scratched him, he scratched him, she punched him, kicked him. She did everything in her power to get away. If you ever get into an altercation, like you feel like your life is in danger, please scratch the heck out of the person who is trying to do you some harm, because that DNA gets under your fingernails and they can find your predator like that with the DNA. Hopefully that never happens, but I'm just giving you a tip in order for you to like defend yourself. He finally gained control of Nikki when he put a nylon sock around her neck and strangled her to death. Of course, he took pictures of Vicky once she had passed away. The windows in Vicky's house were all up. Since they had gotten into the altercation, the big fight, he was afraid that somebody had heard it, so he tried taking the pictures as fast as he could. He cleaned up as fast as he could, and he got the heck out of there. Took Vicky's car keys and got into her car and drove away. Vicky's husband, Bill, was actually on his way home, and he saw, like, he's going that way, and he saw Vicky's car coming this way, but he did not see the driver. So when he got home, he saw his 2-year-old son in the living room, started looking for Vicky until he eventually found her passed away in her bedroom. That's when he called 911. Police officers, they thought the Bill was the killer, like, not the killer, but he was their primary suspect at the time. And once again, Rader gets away with murder. That brings us to January 19th, 1991, with Rader's 10th and last victim, Dolores Davis, who was 62 at the time. And it is believed that he started choosing older women because, remember, he had gone into altercations with the last few victims that he had. So he's much older now. He can't afford to put up a fight anymore. He can't afford to lose them. So that's why it is believed that he started taking older victims during this time. He goes to Dolores's backyard and he gets a brick, throws the brick to Dolores' glass door. Dolores comes like panicked. She's startled when she sees Rader, and Rader comes to her and says that he just needs some food, he just needs some money and a car and some water and warmth, because he is a fugitive on the run and he just needs to get out of there. He's not gonna do anything to her. Rader goes, handcuffs Dolores to her bed, and while Dolores was handcuffed, Rader actually is going through her house looking for food, but in reality he was just going through Dolores's personal items. While he was pretending to get food, he was actually seeing where the car was, where the car keys were. After he was done seeing like the house and the car, he goes back to Dolores, uncuffs her, ties her up, and with a pantyhose he proceeds to strangle Dolores until Dolores has no life and passes away. Rader proceeds to put Dolores on top of a blanket, covers her and drags her to Dolores's car. And one thing I forgot to mention is while this was going on, he was at a Boy Scout leader meeting where he just felt the urge. He got out of the meeting where he was at, got into his car, drove to the church where he attended, left his car at the church, and walked all the way to Dolores's house. So that's why he was looking for Dolores's car. Then he dragged Dolores all the way to her car and put her in the back of her trunk. When he put Dolores's body in her trunk, he actually drove to a lake near Park City. He hid the body and some evidence under a tree, got back into Dolores's car, drove the Mrs. Dolores car back to her house, cleaned it up, walked back to his church to get his car, drove to Dolores's body, put Dolores's body into his trunk. And then after he put Dolores, and I'm laughing because I'm like, the struggle you're going through. Then he drives Dolores's body to dump her under a bridge in Sedgwick County. And I look down my nose because sometimes I don't know how to pronounce words, so I'm guiding myself. After he disposed of her body under the bridge in Sedgwick County, he went back to the meeting as if nothing had happened. The following evening, he went back to Dolores's body to, guess what, to take pictures of the body. Like, you have to be a sicko to keep going back to the body. And I've heard in many documentaries and shows that people often, like serial killers, often go back to the body or to the place where they killed the person to to go over the memory once again of what had happened. That's what I'm trying to get at. Once again, police did not connect Dolores Davis to Dennis Rader because, once again, this is not the method that Dennis is used to. The Wichita Eagle ran the 30th anniversary article on BTK. And the article just said how in those times BTK set this panic off, and it also said that since there were no more killings after Dolores Davis, that he was either imprisoned or dead. Of course, Rader gets a hold of the 30th anniversary article, and I'm guessing he's enraged because he has faded. He sent various items from Vicky's murder, such as photo ID, pictures of her body, and of course nobody would have these pictures unless it was the actual killer who did it. This is how they came to the conclusion that BTK, bind, torture, and kill Dennis Rader was still alive. For the next year after the article came out, he sent and left packages around the Wichita County, and he often used cereal boxes because guess what? Serial killer. Inside those packages were like written descriptions about the murders, pictures, souvenirs, anything that had to do with a specified murder that he did. He put it in there to I believe to taunt the police, like, hey, it's been 30 years and I'm still out here, you haven't catched me. May 5th 2004, he sends KAKETB a fake photo ID. He sends a BTK memoir of what the biography should be about, and also like a word search puzzle game. The police actually found words on the word search puzzle such as fantasies, prowl, and the number 6220, which was actually Dennis Rader's number address. In December 13th 2005, Rader leaves a garbage bag in the Wichita State Park, and this garbage bag is found by a person who is just walking by. He sees the garbage bag, I'm guessing he opens it. Inside the bag was Nancy's fox driver's license, and a Barbie doll with a hood over its head, and the arms tied behind her back. Rader took it a step further. I'm guessing like 30 years of not being caught is getting to his head, because on January 25th, 2005, he sent instructions to KAKE TV on where to find some cereal boxes that he had left. And one was on the side of the road. Inside were descriptions of Rader's first murder and a Barbie doll in a pose as if she were dead. The second package was actually sent to a Home Depot parking lot, and they searched it and couldn't find it, so they put like this announcement at where the Home Depot employee area was, if anybody had come across these cereal boxes, to reach out to the police. And a worker reached out to the police and told them, hey, like, I was the one who found the cereal box. It was just on the trunk of my car. He had like a pickup truck, so it was in that trunk bed. Inside the box that was found in the bed of the pickup truck, he actually asked the police officers if he was to communicate through a floppy disk, would it be traceable back to him? If it was not traceable, the police people had to reply by saying, Rex, it will be okay. And of course, when I'm reading this, like, you really think the police officers, like the detectives are going to tell you, hey, yeah, it's not safe for you to communicate with us through a floppy disk because we can actually trace you? No, the police detectives were not going to do that. So of course they ran an ad on the newspaper saying, Rex, it will be okay. By February 16, 2005, Rader had actually sent via mail the floppy disk. And this is where things get good, because of course the police people, the detectives, were waiting for this floppy disk. They get the floppy disk, insert it to the computer, and guess what they found? Dun, dun, dun. They have found that Dennis had actually used the floppy disk at Christ Lutheran Church and the public library. So of course detectives are not going to just stand there and say, who the heck is Dennis? They got into their World Wide Web, typed Christ Lutheran Church, clicked on the link, and who do you think appears on the website? Dennis Rader. And remember how I said that the second cereal box was left at a Home Depot? Well, Home Depot has security cameras, they have surveillance, and the detectives actually went to the Home Depot to ask for this surveillance. They could not make out who the person who dropped off the cereal box was, but they did make out something: the car the person was driving. And guess what type of car this person was driving? Jeep Cherokee. So what's next? What's next to find out? They find out Dennis Rader, they find out his address, and police officers actually do like a drive-by to where he is, and they see none other than the car that was at the security surveillance, the Jeep Cherokee. And they're like, we got our guy, we have our guy, let's get the warrant, let's arrest this mofo because we got him. But of course they couldn't just base off of video surveillance. They actually had to get DNA, because remember, Dennis relieved himself a couple of times in various crime scenes, and they have his DNA on file. And guess what they do? Dennis has 2 kids, a girl and a boy. And guess where Kelly had been a couple of days around that time where they found everything? At the hospital for a checkup. And the detectives went to this hospital, to this clinic, said, hey, like, look, this is what's happening. We need like DNA that you got from this person, from Kelly, because we need to see if it matches any of our DNA that we have for these crimes that have been committed in the 1970s. And of course the clinic is not going to say no, the hospital is not going to say no, so they hand over the DNA. They run the DNA, and guess what comes back? It's a match for Dennis Rader. They have him. He is caught. He has nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. They have DNA evidence. They have video evidence. They have all the evidence that he has sent via mail and packages stating what he has done, the pictures that he has taken of the bodies. So let's just say that he is done. Just a few days later, on February 25th, still on the same year, Rader is arrested on his way home to lunch. So they said, okay, you have your go to arrest Dennis Rader, and of course they're surveilling him, and they see that he's on his way to his house to go for lunch, and on his way there he is arrested and taken into custody. Once he is taken into custody and is at the police station, he is presented with the DNA evidence that link him to the murders, and once he sees that, he confesses right away to the killings. By June 27th, 2005, Rader pleads guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder. After pleading guilty, gives details about the 10 murders and how he proceeded to take care of everything, how everything went about. And you can actually read this if you search Dennis Rader BTK killings or confessions. It actually gives you like what he talked to about with the judge, if you want to go see it. They were gonna go for the not guilty plea, but his lawyer told Rader like, hey, they have overwhelming evidence that you did this, so you have no chance of being not guilty. It is best for you just to plead guilty and to confess and get this over with. On August 18th, 2005, Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms in prison with a minimum of 175 years without the possibility of parole. And that means that he will never ever get out of prison, and I'm glad, because a person like him does not deserve to be out here with our lives being at stake just because he wants to kill. And my people, that has been the story of Dennis Rader. It was a long one. Let me see how much time I've been filming. An hour and 35 minutes. That's how long this story took. This story is definitely a long one. It is the first story that I do in this series, Makeup and Crime, and I'm so happy to share this story with you. I'm so happy to start this journey with you. And in the beginning, it might have looked like I was nervous, and I was because I never know how to start videos like this, never know what to say. But I'm so glad that you are here. I'm so happy of your support. Thank you to everyone that has supported me on my past videos, and I hope to have your support on this new series that I'm starting. Once again, that was the story of Dennis Rader and how he got away with murder for 30+ years. If you have any stories that you would like me to cover, you can always leave a comment down below, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.